Hello everyone, welcome to the week 3 of your lesson. So up until now, we have learned the formation of the universe, the formation of the earth, the formation of life on earth, the characteristic and building blocks of life, driver for biodiversity, components of biosphere, organization of living things, prokaryotes versus eukaryotes, and basic mechanisms for evolution, which are natural selection, mutation, genetic drift, and migration. So if you can see, we've gone from nothing, like from the beginning of time, from the beginning of the universe, and then slowly we are here, where we've tackled a little bit on evolution. So today we will cover speciation. So this is the process of different species being made. We've covered the tree of life before, and you've seen that from the first life, and then it branched out into bacteria, into archaea, into other forms of into eukaryotes, and it keeps on branching and branching until we have plants, animals. So today we cover how that happened, how the branching happened. Okay. So I think today's topic will be a short one. It's pretty straightforward and not much. There's nothing difficult about this concept. But first, what is the definition of a species? So if you see these two owls right here, do you think they are from the same species? Both of them are owls. Are they the same species? What do you think? If you think that they are from the same species, why? Why do you think that? And if you think they are not from the same species, why do you think that? So those who answer no, you are correct. These two owls are not the same species. This cute one, the lighter one right here, is the Echinoptua, the little owl. And the other one right here, this one is burrowing owl, Echin cunicularia. They're not the same species. But why are they not the same species? Both of them are owls, aren't they? They look the same. I mean, like, they're owls. They look very, very similar. What about these cats? Are they the same species? One is a Persian cat and one is a Bombay cat, I think. They look similar. I mean, both of them are cats. Are they the same species? And also these dogs. Are they the same species? One is a big giant dog and the other one is a tiny dog. Do you think they are the same species? So if you say both of them are the same species, yes, you are correct. The cats are the same species, which is Felis catus, and the dogs are the same species, which is Canis familiaris. So what makes these dogs and these cats the same species, but not the owls? What do you think? Is it because of the physical attributes? Well, both of them, when we look at the owls looks the same, but they are not the same species. However, the cats and the dogs, although they look different in their own way, but they are the same species. Is it a habitats? Is it the behavior? Do they behave differently? Well, the cats, some of cat breeds, they have different temperament. They do behave a little bit differently, and the dogs as well. And or is it because of their ability to mate with each other? So the dogs, can they mate with each other? The cats, can they mate with each other? What about the owls? Okay, so a rough, simple definition of a species is their ability to mate. So the owls, they cannot mate with each other, but the cats and the dogs, they can mate with each other, although they look different. Okay. However, the problem with defining species with their ability to mate has there's a problem with that, because a lot of organisms reproduce sexually. For example, definitely bacteria, they can reproduce, they definitely reproduce sexually. Some of them do conjugate, but mostly they reproduce sexually. Some animals, they can do both. They can do sexual, they can reproduce sexually and asexually. So for these sexually reproduced organisms, how can we define a species? It's not straightforward as those that strictly produce sexually. And some species interbreed and produce hybrids. For example, this liger right here. So this is a liger. A liger has a lion father and a tiger mother. So it's a liger. And this is a tigon. A tigon has a tiger father and a lion and a lion mother. So these hybrids, do we consider them as their own species? It's hard to tell, isn't it? So the problem with this, with defining species with their mating ability, is it doesn't really capture these hybrids and also the sexually reproduced organisms. And so gray area exists, like these two, like this liger and tiger right here. So speciation is the event when a lineage splits into different species, like I already told you. So this is a speciation events, and right here, it's when the species just breaks into different species, and then break this break events. It's called speciation. How does it happen? So there are three ways that speciation can happen. We've already covered in last week's lesson about how during continental drift, some organisms may have moved together with the continents, and so they developed their own they started to develop their own ability in the new habitat. And then so the break of that continental drift force their characteristic to be different from each other. So that's called geographic isolation, where there is a physical barrier that separates them, and hence after a few generations they start to have their own characteristic based on the condition in that new habitat. And then the second one is reduction in gene flow. We'll look at this later. And also reproductive isolation. So geographic isolation, like I said, it has a physical barrier. Excuse me. For example, right here, these fruit flies, they are feasting. Excuse me. They are feasting on that rotten banana, and then suddenly they got they got drifted to this island because of storm or whatever. Some maybe with the waves of the ocean transfer the banana together with the flies on this island. So in the new island, those flies on the banana, they started to match with each other, and the flies on the mainland, they mate with each other. And because the condition on the island is different from the mainland, um, the flies on the island started to develop their own characteristics and different um, their own different preferences, like food preferences or mating rituals and things like that. So they started to only, after a few generations, they started to only mate with each other. So when the flies from the island um, are being drifted back to the mainland, they don't mate with the flies on the mainland. So they've started to have that barrier that make them that discourage them from mating with the flies from the mainland. They've started to have that differentiation. So that geographic isolation is believed to be the main thing that drive speciation. It drive at, especially in the first step of speciation. Um, like right here, if you draw it in a diagram like this, so this is a group of the first community of beetles, and then there's like a stream that breaks the community into two, and those right here started to develop their own characteristic. The green beetles started to appear, and natural selection can happen right here, where only green beetles survive in this area. However, here only brown beetles. And then when the stream is not there anymore, they cannot mate with each other anymore. They have developed that different characteristic, that barrier that they just stop them, that just discourage them from mating with each other. So here, from one species into two species. So reduction in gene flow, it's like geographic isolation. However, there's no physical barrier, but geographically reduces the chance of mating between the other ends of the population. Different conditions on the other ends will encourage speciation. This is when, for example, this beetle right here, it covers a lot of land. So the community, the species covers a huge range of land that makes it impossible for the beetles on this end to mate with the beetles on this end. So the beetles on this end will most likely mate with those here, a little less likely with those here, and more less likely than those here, and just no chance of mating with the beetles right here. So you can imagine the beetles right here. So you can imagine the beetles right here has more chance of mating with those right here, not so much right here, and just a little bit right here. So they only mate with those that are close to them, but not those that are too far away. So over many generations, there's like a spectrum of beetles. It started to concentrate it, like here it starts to develop its own characteristic, and here it starts to develop its own characteristic. And if the area that they cover are huge and it has its own, and the area like on this end, say it's the condition is dry and hot, and say right here it's wet and cold and cool. So you can imagine that the beetles right here will start to develop um, attributes that help them to survive in a dry and a hot environment. Whereas here, the beetles right here, it will start to develop characteristics that help them to survive in a wet and cool environment. So after generations and generations, they will start to accumulate these mutations that will help them to survive in that habitat. So over time, it's possible that um, they will they will develop their own species that just the beetles, although there's no physical barrier, but they started to differentiate from each other. Okay, that's reduction in gene flow. So the last one is reproductive isolation. So reproductive isolation is it prevents mating between different incipient species. So incipient species are species that are starting to break, and it is necessary to end speciation process. And it may happen by the evolution of different mating rituals, time or locations, lack of fit between sexual organs, and offspring unviability or sterility. So if you remember this, if you look at this, we talk about how the fly on the island start to only mate with each other, and the fly on the mainland only mate with each other. This may happen because they start to develop their own mating ritual, like a different, maybe their mating ritual focus like happen on a food source, and maybe on the island they have they prefer one type of food source. Say probably on the island there's only coconut, and flies on the island will mate with each other, will have their own mating ritual on a coconut. But the flies on the mainland, the mating rituals happen on a banana, because they only have banana. So after a few generations, their eating habits changes, and the flies on the island only eat coconut, and the flies on the mainland only eat banana. So when they want to mate, they only go to this food source, and that prevents flies from the mainland to mate with flies on the island, because the flies on the mainland doesn't like coconut, whereas the flies on the island doesn't like banana. So that already creates a barrier that prevent flies from the island to mate with flies on the mainland. Okay, so that's the evolution of different mating rituals, time or location. Like right here, this is bowerbird, I think. This is blue bowerbird. So blue bowerbirds, their mating ritual, they built this like a, I don't know, like a nest. It's not a nest, I think, but they built this structure, and it's like um, straight up, and they collect all this blue thing and put around the structure, and this is how they attract their females. Whereas McGregor bowerbird, they built this structure like that, and they don't collect blue things. They collect other things, but not blue things. So blue bowerbird will attract blue bowerbird female blue bowerbird, whereas the McGregor bowerbirds will attract McGregor bowerbirds. So they don't mate with each other because they have different mating rituals. And the second one, lack of fit between sexual organs, especially insects. They have their reproductive organ are very complicated. So if you can see here, damselfly penises, they have 4 different types. So this make it impossible for a different species of damselfly to mate with a to mate with another with a damselfly that is from from a different species, because their reproductive organ doesn't fit. And the last one is offspring unviability or sterility. So this is the, let me remember, I think this is a liger, this is a tigon. Okay, yeah, I'm correct. So this liger right here and this tigon right here, although their parents are from different species and they are able to mate, however, the mating only happen in captivity. In zoos, I read about it some, most of the time it's accidental. I don't know how, but anyway, that's what they say. And sometimes some zoos are not as responsible. They allow them to mate and they end up with this liger and tigon. The problem is this hybrid liger and tigon, most of them are not viable. They are sterile. They cannot, they have a lower fit for survivability. They don't, they have lots of, let's say, medical issues. They cannot reproduce. So they are not fit to survive. So if you can imagine, if in the wild, even if a tiger and a lion interbreed, their offspring cannot survive, and the offspring cannot make more offspring of liger and tigon. Okay, so that creates this like unfit offspring, creates a reproductive barrier, reproductive isolation of the two of animals from the different species. So this reproductive isolation is important to end the speciation process. So you can imagine, like, from this one species, and then geographic isolation start to happen, and that starts the speciation process. And then they start to develop all these mutations, different species, different as these different two different species start to develop their own mutation. They start to develop, they start to accumulate lots and lots and of other mutation until to the point that when they meet again with each other, they cannot produce a fit offspring. It's either from different mating rituals or from, what do we say, from unfit reproductive organ, or from just their offspring just don't have the fitness to survive, like this tiger and liger. So it is important for this to happen. It is important for the reproductive isolation to happen to make sure that these two species will not merge back and becomes one species anymore. Okay. Um, I need to pause. Sorry, my battery was dying. Anyway, so all of this is a theory, right? People believe that that's how it happens. But of course, to prove the theory, people will look for evidence. So evidence for speciation, if we believe that the geographic isolation is what starts out this speciation process, and we believe that over time, over time, the different species will start to develop and accumulate their own mutation. So we should be able to see the genetic differences of species that are the same but only occur in two different geographic area. So populations of the same species in different location would be genetically different. So this is evidence of allopatric speciation. So allopatric speciation is a geographic speciation. So like this northern spotted owl and Mexican spotted owl, both of them are still spotted owl. Both of them are Strix occidentalis. Both of them are Strix occidentalis. However, they are just different breed, and they are from different two different geographic location. One is from one is so the northern spotted owl are only found on the northern part, and Mexican spotted owl are found on the southern part. And when they look at the the genome, they see that these two owls have they are genetically different, although they are not yet different species. They are still the same species, but they have different genetic composition. And another evidence is some people, they set up an experiment to emulate geographic isolation, and they use a fruit fly right here. And what they did was the same group of fruit flies they put into two different containers. One has I think starch-based food, and the second one has maltose-based food, I think. So over generations, the flies with only starch-based food only eats starch-based food, and the flies live on maltose-based food only eats maltose-based food, and they start to mate with their own kind. And when they are regrouped back together, they don't prefer to mate with the group that's from the flies from the opposite group. So they start to develop their own characteristics, their own preferences. So if it is let to happen longer, they may develop their enough mutation to create their own species. So here is how speciation look in a diagram. Let me try. So this is the original population right here. So my internet is slow again. Oh, oh. So the original population right there, if you can see, and then if we put geographic isolation, so it's a physical barrier, it's an extrinsic barrier. So four things can happen. The first one is fusion of incipient populations. So incipient population means that species that are breaking up, but not yet full other species. So fusion of incipient populations back into one species, that can happen. So original population, and then we put, and then the original population are divided into two due to extrinsic barrier, which is a geographic isolation. And then when that barrier is removed, what can happen is these two population can integrate back, and then they can merge back, they can mate back, and then they can fuse back into the original population. So in this case, speciation doesn't finish because it doesn't end up into different species. And then the second thing that can happen is after we remove that geographic isolation, the two incipient populations may be in contact again, and then they produce these hybrids. However, this hybrid has low fitness. So this is when the reproductive isolation happen. So the hybrid does not have the fitness to survive. And over time, the two ends of the incipient species really start to diverge from each other because they cannot mate with each other anyway, because their offspring cannot survive. So they really separate from each other. The unfit hybrids just dies off and not survive, and we end up with two different species. So in this case, the speciation finish, it comes to an end. We end up with two different species. Okay, so that one is called reinforcement. And the third one is stable or transient hybrid zone formation. This is when this is when the barrier is there long enough that the species developed because the physical barrier is just not there, and they just end up accumulating enough differences genetic wise that they cannot that they're just very different from each other. However, when the barrier is removed, when they are already different, when they meet with each other, they can still mate with each other and create this hybrid. And this hybrid is stable, is not unfit, not like the second one, where the hybrid is unfit, and after a while the hybrid just dies off, and just they stop mating with each other anymore. With the third one, the hybrid can survive, and we end up with this gray area. That's what we said earlier. We have this gray area of hybrid. Okay, it's like the hybrid is not its own species, rather it's just like a hybrid. Is that gray area. And the fourth one is a speciation of hybrids. This is when the extrinsic barrier is there, the geographic isolation is there for a long time, and then two different species happen. And then when the geographic barrier is not there anymore, they can mate with each other and they create this hybrid. However, the hybrid start to develop on its own special characteristic. So At the end, we end up with with three species. So the hybrid starts to develop its own species as well. So instead of two species, we end up with three species. So these are the things that can happen, but basically the basic thing that happened is the same, is because of geographic isolation, and also it is reinforced by reproductive isolation. So what have we learned today? We have learned about the definition of species, which is species is a species. A species is species if they can mate with each other. If they cannot mate with each other, they are not a species. And causes of speciation, we learn about the geographic isolation and also the reproductive isolation. However, we have to remember that gray area exists because that's nature. However, before we go, what is co-speciation? I want you to look that up and answer in Putra Plus for your proof of attendance. Okay, if you like, for example, if you look it up and you answer whatever that you understand from it, and if you still unsure what is co-speciation, just start a topic on in our forum, for this week, so that we can have a discussion on that. Okay, so just give your answer what is called speciation in Putra Plus, and that will be your proof of attendance. And that's it for today. Is like I said, today is a short topic because it's a pretty straightforward idea, a straightforward topic. And I'll see you next week. Bye.